Yeah, not every year.
Not every year.
Not every year, certainly not. That's what I like to do.
So the camera is running. Is everybody ready to start?
Yep.
Okay. And I just wanted to say we got an email saying there's no grace period to keep the tournament running quick. So it's going to be a hard stop at 7, 8, 4, and 5.
That's good. Sounds good.
Please do that.
I have a question. Did both of you read the rest, or do you want us to read out like the entire info slide?
I read it.
So
If,
I did not read it. And I'm
so yeah,
not-
please read it for us then.
You do it all the time though.
Okay.
On camera.
The res is off time is if the technology existed, this house as a parent would use the child chip, and the child chip is painlessly and safely implemented into babies. Sorry, I think it says implanted. My bad. Into babies' brains after birth. The technology allows a parent to see the child's location at all times and use their smartphone to see what the child is currently seeing and implement content restrictions on what the child can see. That's
Like the examples they
You
gave were
wrote
like,
the whole thing out.
I did because in this case scenario, they can like dampen disturbing audio or blur sensitive content were the two examples given.
when a child's stress tends to go up, the parent will receive a
Stress
notification.
levels.
Sorry, when a child's stress levels go up, the parent will receive a notification and can alter any settings remotely. The chip will be permanently irreversibly disabled once the child reaches 16.
And then off-time roadmaps are allowed. I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify that.
Sure. Thank you. Is that the okay, off-time roadmap, there's 2 advantages. That's pretty much all. Okay. My time begins in 3, 2, 1. Starting with the top of case, we're going to be finding this house as a rational actor, and the way mechanism is going to be benefits with a focus on the parent and the child, but also looking at an overall society where this would be implemented. That being said, the advantage number 1 is, the POCs on top of case for definitions needed. Okay. For the ad 1, it's going to be what's best for the parent. The A point on this is safety and security. With real-time location tracking, parents are able to locate their child in emergencies, ensuring safety. This replaces the need for anything else and makes sure that they're going to have a permanent and solid actual know where the location of your child is. The B point here is prevention of harmful experiences. In today's digital age, children are exposed to a plethora of content, not all of which is suitable for their age or development level. I mean, we think that a lot of kids, when they go on social media, are going to be exposed to things which are just extremely harmful, and we think that if that's avoided, that leads to better lives being led because they're not traumatized by these experiences. We also think that the child's chip empowers parents to filter access, safeguarding them from exposure to inappropriate or harmful material. By curating their child's digital environment, parents foster a safe and uplifting space where children are then able to live in a world where they're not going to be scared of seeing something, or children aren't going to be scared of going on their phone and seeing something that's going to induce stress on them. The C point here is peace of mind. What we think is that parents are is fraught with worry and anxiety, especially when it comes to the safety and well-being of one's child. The child chip alleviates these concerns by providing parents with constant monitoring and notifications about the child's status. We also think that this peace of mind is invaluable, allowing parents to navigate the challenges of parenting with greater confidence and security. We also think that studies show that stress levels decrease when they have parents' stress levels decrease when they have access to reliable means of communication and connection to monitoring their child's safety. This shows that the parents will likely not be stressing as much and likely grant their child more independence because they understand that when there is anything that goes on, they're going to be able to know where the child is and monitor what they are doing on social media. The D point under this is that it's good for communication and connection. The child chip facilitates strong and healthy parent-child relationships that can be checking in on the child's day or sending reassuring messages. The E point is data-driven parenting practices. The chip allows insights into a child's behavior and experiences. This highlights the importance of understanding of child's differences in child development and how tailored interventions positively impact outcomes. Think of this as a long-term impact for side government, because if you think about it, when there is data on how a child behaves or how they perceive stress, then there can be better practices to help understand in the future how you can parent a child to experience less stress, or how social media companies can tailor their content so that they're not inducing stress on minors on the platform. Again, looking at the impacts on this argument, we see that for parent want what's best for the kids. Therefore, you're going to see that the parents are going to have alleviated stress because of this technology, and they're also going to be able to know where the child is and ensure safety among them. It's also best for the parent because of mental health. They're not going to be stressing as much. Therefore, they can go through their life with positive reassurance that their child is going to be okay. The advantage number 2 for this argument is what's best for the child. We urge you that on the A point of this to look at the status quo. Our world is becoming increasingly online, meaning that understanding how to navigate that world has become a life skill. The child chip works for 3 reasons. 1, there's greater discourse. Parents will have to be more open and discuss how to handle seeing negative content on the internet. In this quo, often when children see that type of thing, they don't talk to their parents about it, or they just try to ignore it and pack it up. But we think that this actually means that there's going to be more open communication between the child and the parent, which lets children be able to experience how to understand stress so that when they turn 16, they're going to be able to monitor stress in the real world. The second point here is that it's better understanding of content filters. Isha. Can't keep those later in life to avoid triggers, and it means that later in your life you're gonna understand how to use content filters, so that if you like the protection that the child chip gave you, you're gonna be able to apply content filters and understand the value of them. The third point here is that it prevents harmful online interactions. In 2022, there was an 82% increase in missing children reports connected to internet use. We also urge you to look at the fact that on-side opposition, they're already attempting to do a very low-key version of the child chip, but we see that it's probably not working as shown by these statistics. So don't prefer an alternative where there's YouTube Kids. Prefer this because it actually gets to the root of the problem, which is a parent isn't able to see in real time a child's location / being able to stop what they're seeing as they experience the stress. All of theirs are secondary to experiencing the stress. The B point here is also, you guessed it, stress. We say that this child chip combats it, and it allows for emotional / mental problems to stop. The reason that deaths from heart disease have 2 times in the past 50 years is the increase in control from stress. We think stress is going to be one of the biggest things as we go into the next generation. Therefore, preventing stress and limiting stress among the youth especially is going to allow for better and more peaceful lives. The C point under this is violence. Violent content exposure increases aggression. Anxiety in children says a 2019 study affirms that this is the case. Then, moving to the D point here, we see physical safety. 797,500 children reported missing in 2019. Location tracking in lifetime solves. Again, Life 360 isn't a solution here, because obviously kids, they take your phone, they can't take your brain out of your head. So by the fact that this actually solves for that fundamentally. Also, apply a I think it's 50-hour rule or something. Once a child is reported missing, you have up to 50 hours, and then the chance that they get kidnapped, the chance that you don't find them is extremely high. Then the E point here is you're focused more in school. There's less distraction, and 5% of teens in 2021 said they feel 50% of teens in 2021 said they feel addicted to their phones. So it prevents that because now parents can make it so that kids aren't using their phone in school by either sending them reassuring messages when they feel stressed about being disconnected from their phone, or making sure that they turn their phone off while they're in school, which allows for better education. The F point here is cyberbullying. It stopped this at an early age, and you need to have strong bonds /friendships. It's important to have these before high school, and being able to experience what it's like to be able to have to go out and make social interactions and not just be on your phone is extremely valuable. The impacts of this are pretty simple. For the child, the physical health is going to be increased because now the child has an ability to not be kidnapped, as there's a more higher likelihood of authorities being able to respond to that, and it lowers the incentive of kidnapping someone because that's just not going to happen if they know that they can be tracked constantly. Also, we think of the mental health impacts here. Look to the fact that A, there's going to be prevention of cyberbullying. B, you're going to see decreased anxiety among kids. Thank you.
Okay. 3F.
That's your alarm going off. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, it is,
So it was perfect at 7.
Yeah.
The order will be framework, 3 neg sheets, and then on case in order.
And then just for note purposes, who was the first speaker and what's your name?
Yeah, I'm Logan Ramanathan.
Okay.
I'm the first.
Xander Deutsch.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you guys mind if I stay seated or
That's
Yeah,
totally
I-
fine.
my time begins? Now, hello, judges and opponents. Once again, my name is Logan Ramanathan. Today I stand in the strongest opposition of the resolution at hand. Before we get into the specific arguments made by both sides, I'd like to start on the framework level by defining this house by looking at like the specific way that you're going to be valuing this round. So our opponents define this house as a rational actor. I'd like to refine this a little bit. Since this house is a parent, we're going to define this house as a general parent who's looking out for the best future of their kid. There's no reason why we should prefer like a rational actor. This is the real world, and these are real world impacts. So we're going to look at a real world parent and how they would be acting in order to parent their kid the best. And some observations on that level.
POC.
Sure.
So, when we said rational actor, we mean like a parent who's not.
I think POCs have to be about.
Yeah.
What are the definitions? Is that okay?
Yeah,
So, when you mean rational actor, like, is that just like a normal parent? Because that's what we meant.
Oh yeah, so I'm meaning an average parent.
Okay.
Like who's looking out for the best, but parents are not always rational.
Okay.
That's the observation.
Perfect.
Okay, so my time will restart. Now, yeah, so the observations, there's two here. Is the first is that parents are generally risk averse. This is just because like parents have a biological tendency to limit risk for their child whenever possible. And the second is that parents will want to observe their kids. The warrant here is that Life360 currently has 54 million users. What Life360 is basically an app to like track your kid. You know, you can have like notifications when they get to a certain place, if they go over a certain speed when they're driving, all sorts of like features that they have. And there's been a 29% increase this year. This probably indicates that like a huge amount of parents like across America are using Life360 because they want to be in control of their kid's life. They want their kid to be not in the way of danger, and they want to like put any measure in place in order to have that happen. So that leads us to the first disadvantage to to implementing this, which is privacy. The first observation here is that parents can literally see what the kid is seeing. Given by the resolution, the parent can observe their kid's life through their eyes and like watch what they're seeing in every moment. This means that intimate moments are always a risk of being observed, and in fact they probably are observed, and this causes developmental stunting. Social interactions are augmented, and it deprives children of valuable teaching moments. This is why a UVA study found that kids with more overbearing parents overall had less education and less likelihood of being in a romantic relationship by the age of 32. This is a survey of a study of 184 young people from the ages of 13 to 32. The reason this is important is because being married is like one of the biggest indicators of life expectancy. Having romantic relationship or friendships are like really important, and the tools to like develop those things happen very early on. If no like moment can ever be alone with a kid and somebody else, then they're never going to develop the skills to have a genuine friendship because they're always being observed by their parents. We also tell you that like if their education is worse because they're unable to like advocate for themselves, that is also really bad because education is one of the keys to like escaping poverty and things like that. So that leads us to the second disadvantage, which is going to be about sheltering. We tell you that the chip allows for location and like smartphone like tracking like monitoring of everything the kid sees, which means they can literally like blur out certain like content even in real time. The tracking prevents like risk because if a parent feels like the kid shouldn't see something, they can prevent it. This causes like a huge amount of sheltering because the kid won't be able to experience things. They won't be able to make risky like choices for themselves, which are key to child development. Things even like just like going to a party and like seeing what that's like, or anything like that, or having an intimate moment. Those things are going to be prevented because a kid can always have that content be like blurred from them. The impacts here are sheltering. First is that risk is necessary for children to learn basic problem solving and self-sufficiency skills. We see that risk aversion is correlated with cognitive decline and depression. And when a kid turns 16, they will be completely unprepared for the real world. We tell you that like the resolution says that when they're 16, the chip like irreversibly turns off, which means they will be like very inclined to kind of rebound back into things that they weren't able to have access to before. For example, alcohol and drugs, unsafe areas, or even like online content that they had heard about previously but were never able to observe themselves, never able to find a way to look at because they were like physically unable to do so because their brain was altered. This is going to lead to a huge amount of distrust because a parent and a kid will struggle during adolescence as a parent and kid fight over independence. This is going to lead to hostility and arguments. And distrust worsens when the kid turns 16 because they'll feel a desire to go against their parents. I'm pretty sure every kid, every teenager has felt this desire when their parents want to like be overbearing and force them to do something that you don't feel like you had a choice in, and you want to go against them. This is empirically true. Like, go back to this UVA study. We found that kids like with more controlling parents like overall have worse outcomes across the board because they don't develop these skills of self-sufficiency. This also means that kids are going to be subject to vulnerable to abusive relationships, which are extremely dangerous. Like domestic violence is like one of the most common ways that people are like hurt inside of the U.S. And if kids are not able to like stand up for themselves, are not able to have been put in a risky situation and be able to handle that, then they're never going to develop these skills of like self advocacy and things like that. The last contention is on parent responsibility. We tell you that parents have control of the settings on this like chip. This means that they have the illusion that they can control everything that happens to the kid, and gives the illusion of complete and total control. Content restrictions, however, can't actually prevent bad things from happening to the kid, like things like bullying, things like depression, or like actually bad situations that can happen to these kids simply can't be prevented by the parents. And as soon as they turn 16, all of these things will once again be subject to them. Things like cyberbullying that like were previously like off limits for the kid are now like totally on limits, and they have never developed the skills to be able to deal with that because parents who are limited with time are just going to stop and like limit those content to make sure their kid is not like subject to that before they turn 16. So with that said, with all those negative impacts explained, I'll get into some responses on our opponent's case. So the main point here is they talk about safety and security. They tell you that like kids, like the world is a really dangerous place and that kids need to like be monitored. But we tell you overall, this is absolutely not true. The world is becoming safer and safer every single year. Motor vehicle deaths are like down 43% in the last decade. Sexual assault has fallen by 64% from 1992 to 2011. Abductions have fallen from 43% from 1997 to 2012. There's been a 10% reduction in the deaths of kids below 5 in the last 10 times reduction in deaths for kids below 5 in the last decade. And 0.01% of missing person reports are actually like abductions. Like there are thousands of these reports every year, and like they're almost never an abduction. Like kids are almost always safe. We tell you that the U.S., like according to a CDC study, is safer than it has ever been for children. But what they focus on here is digital harm and content. They tell you this is going to create a safe space for peace and like growth. But we tell you that kids are going to be scared because as soon as they turn 16, they have no exposure to any of this, and they're going to be like put in the real world where they've had no experience existing in. They tell you it's going to alleviate stress for parents, but actually it's going to do the opposite because instead of parents like having some control but also realizing that their kids are their own person, they have all the control. Meaning if anything happens to their kids, parents will feel personal responsibility for that, and that is bad. They tell you that like this is good for relationships, but we tell you the exact opposite. If parents are spying on their kids at all times, the kids are not going to get along with their parents. They tell you it's good for long-term parenting and data-driven tactics. But we tell you that like data mining and advertising is probably what's going to be the reality here. Like look to like Facebook and like Instagram, looking for kids. And we tell you that they just won't be able to handle this until they're 16 years old, and that kids are curious, which means they're going to try like find ways to get around this once they are older. On the stress thing, we tell you that if kids don't develop these stress managing things, they will never be able to do it in the real world. They will stay addicted to their phones, get more addicted, and they will have a hard time. So because we want to look out for the future of our children, I strongly urge an opposition vote. Thank you.
Okay, off to roadmap. I'm gonna give an overview on. Okay, we'll do 2 big observations and then a little bit on impacts in my overview, and then we're going to do the off case like that. So overview with 3 things off the bat. Okay. Everything arguments-wise will be in order. Oh, and I'll touch framework before I go into case anything. So overview, 3 things, framework off go. Is anyone not ready? Okay. POI's nonverbal would be great. You can wait.
Okay.
Okay. My time starts now. there's two big fallacies that drive a nice straight view opposition's case. The first is that not everyone will walk around with this technology in their heads, meaning that if Xander and I are both standing and having a conversation, and one of us has the child chip and the other doesn't, Xander doesn't have the same incentive I do to behave. Meaning that you can still, like, if you're feeling watched every moment, you can still cultivate good relationships because the people you're cultivating relationships with will not have the same fear. The other thing is, parents want what's best for their children, so when it comes to, on the bottom right of you, maybe I have a lot to get through. People want what's best for their children, and if there's all these empirics and evidence that show that being overbearing is going to harm their children, then even if they're somewhat irrational, they're going to want their children to be well. I.e., if they want their children to have healthy family like friendships, which parents usually encourage friendships, they're going to encourage them to bond and not like hover and criticize and be like, hey Xander, you said this one mean thing to Keisha, blah 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 blah. Or the same thing would follow with me. Okay, the second big issue here is that they have this sort of double-bind scenario where they tell you either you're never going to experience anything big and bad in your entire life and you're not going to be able to handle it, and then B, they only focus on the internet world. Meaning that we all walk through life. The biggest things we fight are probably not on our social media platforms. They're probably in real life. Like, sure, you can get cyberbullied online, you can get bullied in person. So these people are still going to build up these skills to live the rest of their lives because they're going to experience these issues in person, meaning everything that they say about how people are going to be unprepared for the real world falls. So the last big thing on my overview is the two levels of impact. I will get to your POI, probably the end of your case, I'm sorry, so much to get through. So we run on probability and magnitude. Here's why. There's a high probability you will see bad content on the internet. Content that's triggering, content that's inappropriate, content that could scar a 16-year-old. There's a low probability, but a very high magnitude impact of getting kidnapped. Both of them have very high magnitude impacts, but we can agree that we're going to have some sort of risk that's like avoided on social media, or a really huge risk avoided in real life. So on either link level, we're going to win on impacts. Okay, on framework, I honestly think we said the exact same thing about rational actor and parents. I agree that parents can be irrational, but what we meant by rational actor is like, we're not going to have some sort of really crazy wacko parent, and I think we all agree on that. Okay. I give two observations. The first was that parents are risk averse. We agree, but I'd also argue that parents learn how to take calculated risks. We all have parents, hopefully. I'm lucky enough to have parents, and I can tell that they let me take calculated risks as I've gotten older once I demonstrate that I'm able to do so. I.e., like the first time I took public transit alone is because I proved that I could take the risk. And I think parents would be more okay with children taking calculated risks if they were able to see where their kids were. I.e., like if you're sending your 10-year-old on a train, they're more scared of doing so unless they can see where you are and see that you're okay. So we're going to see that there's a greater building of independence because parents can help their children build these skills. And if you're able to feel okay in public transit every time you're like with your parents watching with your brain, then you'll be able to pick up the phone and call them the next time you took it alone, and then you'll feel even more confident because you can navigate sketchy scenarios in life when you take it alone with no parent on the phone. Meaning that it builds this like stepping stone ladder to being like comfortable in risk-intense scenarios because your parents' risk aversion translates into helping set up steps to get like approaching those risks. And then they said they liked watching kids, and they, like, not in like a creepy way, but in like a, like, parents have access to their phones, they're gonna wanna see. But here's where that falls. Parents have jobs, parents have lives. They can't sit there and watch through your eyes for 24 hours. If you have 2 kids, and you have absolutely nothing else to do in your life, that means you can spend 12 hours on each one. Meaning that there's still 12 hours where they're not looking. So the biggest impact here is the fact that they get notified when you're stressed. They're not scrolling through your phone when you're happy. They're getting notified when you're seeing triggering content that they have to help you with. So it isn't sort of just them watching all the time, it's them watching when you really need the help, and the way that this is set up makes sure that there's a mechanism to do so. DI1 is privacy. They say that the kid can see what you're doing with the intimate moments. Here's the thing, this entire advantage or disadvantage isn't really impacted out. What we get is the fact that you won't be married and that you'll die sooner because of the UVA study. But here's a couple things. First of all, the kid isn't even 16. The kid can't drive. The kid legally cannot have sex, drink, or smoke. So are you losing that many valuable life skills that you're saying that because you were underdeveloped at 15, you're not going to get married, have lasting relationships, have a life? I think when you go off to high school, you learn how to build those lasting relationships. When you go off to college, you learn how to build those lasting relationships. And I'd argue that there's a greater incentive to be nice to people and learn how to create friendships if you know that someone's watching. So they tell you that if there's intimate moments in your life can always be observed. We walk around in a world with a bunch of cameras. Like our schools probably have cameras at a certain point. Public spaces have cameras. We know to a certain extent we are being watched. People can film whatever you do, and we already have an incentive to act well because of this. But because our parents are seeing it, adds even greater incentive. So because we honestly, in this digital day and age, because I can point a phone at any of you and take a photo, means that we have lost a reasonable expectation of privacy in public spaces. That's why there's like free use photos, and if you're in a public space or a public figure, you can be like taking photos of people on the internet just by like press law, shows that we've lost this reasonable expectation of privacy. I'd argue that having your parent do it doesn't have an added harm. You don't push us over a brink. I think that having a parent see you incentivizes even better behavior because you want your parents to think well of you, right? Like, Just easy, intuitive logic. You do bad things, you get grounded, incentive not to do bad things. Okay. So if your impact is that you don't get married and you die versus you avoid being kidnapped or seeing really triggering content on the internet, I think just on probability is a very clean way from the government today. Okay, then they talk about education being the key to escaping poverty. We run really cleanly on education because we tell you that if you're not on your phone in school, you're going to focus more. And also because so much of learning has become digital, learning how to interact with a digital learning environment is so important, right? Like you see all these kids who go on their phones and like, or go on their laptops and text instead of listening to the teacher, or do all the New York Times puzzles because what else are you supposed to do in class? So we see that learning how to use these technologies in an important way means that when you go off to high school, when you go off to college, you're going to have those skill sets already built up. Kids' minds are so susceptible to addiction when they're younger, meaning that having it on this time frame is uniquely a good mechanism to like the child's success. DA2 is like being sheltered. They tell you that parents like are really sheltering and want to be able to take a calculated risk. I'd argue that in our digital day and age, you don't prove that there's like a huge issue between Live 360 sheltering and this sheltering. I'd argue that if your parents can already track your every movement, then what's the added risk to having it in your brain? I think that's a better mechanism because if like I'm gonna sneak out of my house, I can leave my phone in my house and then not be tracked versus Live 360, and then I could get kidnapped. But if it's in my brain, I'm not gonna tear out my brain and leave it at home. Okay. Then they talk about how this risk aversion leads to cognitive decline and depression. They can't problem solve, but we already have this risk aversion in the status quo. If you're a parent and you're already risk averse, it's non-unique. They're not solving for risk aversion. We tell you that parents being able to see what you're doing allows them to let you take calculated risks. Okay, they talk about how they'll like basically go on a bender because they didn't have access to all of these things. First of all, child like fights for freedom are non-unique. They tell you themselves in the status quo, people already fight their parents for freedom, so we're not seeing a big difference. Like if your parents ground you and watch your phone be a Live 360, you're probably not sneaking out and like drinking every night already. So we're not seeing how their side leads to this brink. Okay. Sorry?
Kids begin to understand.
Kids be able to understand because if their parents have like more open conversations about the content they see on social media, they're more likely to have conversations about like, okay, this is a safe way to like drink and do drugs. Like kids with more open parents are usually less like likely to overdose or something like that because if you can tell your parents, hey, I'm going to drink, can you pick me up? That's better than letting someone drunk drive you home. Okay, then they talk about this like illusion of control and domestic violence and needing to knowing how to act in risky situations. But we tell you that living through life and having bad friends and getting bullied in person teaches you just like getting cyberbullied will. And like real life non-violence, they don't solve for. Okay, on our side, we get mostly cross supplies. They tell us that the world is getting safer and they give us a list of statistics. We tell you that the internet is getting unsafe. Like look at the dark web, look at all the statistics we wrote about like child kidnapping, an 82% increase from like internet related crime, i.e. the internet is linked to children getting like exploited. And the internet is getting more dependent. We can classify the fact that you guys are flowing on your computers shows that we've gotten so dependent even like any sort of space. Then they tell you that the people will be scared because they have no exposure, parents will have too much control, and they'll feel bad because they won't be able to protect their kids. I'd argue that this is going to help parents understand how to strike a balance with their kids. If you put a chip in someone's brain, they're going to talk to you about it, and I think that's pretty intuitive. And they tell you that social media companies will misuse this data and data mine. I disagree. If someone thinking in your brain, there's going to be a bunch of government regulations check back. For all those reasons and many more, I urge a vote for the affirms today. Or opposite. Thank you. Okay.
Can I see the
I
rest?
didn't have time. Yeah, but it's okay. It's like on my flow though.
No, I'm gonna give it back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That actually took like a full 5 minutes of my prep time. I was sitting there scribbling furiously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Off-time roadmap. I'm gonna first go over a clarification of. I know. Okay, I'm gonna first go over a clarification on the resolution that will hopefully make the round a little bit more clear. And then I'm gonna go into topic case, and then I'm going to go neg in order, and then affirms order. Cool. My time will start in 3, 2, 1. Judges, the fundamental misunderstanding of this round is that my opponents believe that the parent can only see the kid's smartphone. This is not true. If you look at the text of the resolution, it says that the parent can see through the kid's eyes using the smartphone of the parent, meaning that the parent has a screen on their phone that allows them to see what the kid is seeing. This essentially moots a bunch of my opponent's responses because they say that there's a difference between real world and smartphone things, when the reality of the chip is that it allows for adults to see what their kid is seeing in the real world.
You know what?
Yeah.
Let's say you're taking a train and like a strange man comes up to harass you and your parents can see that.
Yep.
Is the fact that your parents can see that going to prevent that stranger's behavior?
Like the parent can probably call 911 or something.
In the time it takes someone to get assaulted.
Like,
Just move on.
yeah, okay. Like,
It's not
okay.
relevant.
All right, moving on. So now I'm gonna go into the framework. So starting at the first point that like there's no crazy wacko parents. There are certainly crazy wacko parents, and we shouldn't risk the fact that like there's not gonna be a crazy wacko parent who uses the chip as an excuse to like potentially ruin the development of a child. Secondly, my opponents say that parents learn to take calculated risks, but the point is that parents don't always learn to take calculated risks because not all parents are the same. And also, what a parent defines a calculated risk as is different than what another parent defines as a calculated risk. Meaning that by voting for the affirmation, you're essentially taking a chance that the parent who has this chip is a good parent, which is not something we want to do because A, a lot of parents are like worse than they think, and B, like even a 1% chance that this parent is bad is like really detrimental. And I'll get onto that one next thing. And then the other response here is that my partner tells you that parents are biologically risk averse, which means that when they have the ability to control their child, they're not to be acting based on a calculated risk mindset. They're going to be specifically risk averse, which means that they're not going to be like rational. And my parents say parents have jobs and lives, but the difference is here that judges, it isn't about the parent always watching the kid, it's about the fact that the kid always thinks they're being watched. That's the difference. Because even if the parent isn't looking all the time, to the kid, the parent could be looking at any given time and they won't know. So the child has to be on edge at every moment of their life. And this is why like we see the impacts of real world relationships that we do. Then my opponents on their like 1, 2, 3, they say not everyone will have the tech, and they give this example of Xander. Sure, Xander could be acting normal to me, but if I think that my parent is watching me, I'm not gonna act normal to Xander. And I'm sure you guys know, in order for a relationship to happen, both people have to be acting like normally. If Xander's like, what's up, and I like don't respond, then we are not going to form a relationship.
Also, if your parents are watching me, I don't want to be friends with you. I'm being watched too.
Yeah, exactly. Also, if my parent is watching me, then I don't want to be friends with you because then my parent is going to start watching you because we're going to be friends, right? There's so many issues with this. And then secondly, my parents, they say that parents are going to do what's best for their kid. Again, parents are going to do what they think is best for their kid, which is oftentimes not going to be what's best for their kid. That's why we see bad parents in the status quo. If my opponents were true, then all parents would be great right now. But the reason that they're not is because parents do things that aren't the best. Then my opponents talk about the double bind, about how they focus on the internet, and then the things in real life. Like again, my kind of talk at the beginning of the speech clarifies this. It's about like what the child is seeing. And then my opponents say like high magnitude and high probability impacts. We tell you that like the high like they probably don't solve for either of these things. Okay, so going on to the privacy argument, my opponent's first response is that they have no impacts. We tell you that the impact is like distrust between the child and the parent, and also that like they aren't going to be able to legally do stuff. My opponents say that kids aren't going to be able to drive, aren't going to be able to drink. Two responses here. One, kids do underage drinking. Kids like do underage driving. This is a thing that happens, and sheltering your kid completely from it is like not good. And number two, it's about building the POI. When I'm done. And number two is that they're building the foundation for the kid, right? Like there's most brain development that happens during adolescence, meaning that you're going to create the foundation for bad relationships before the kid turns 16. Meaning that even if you're not monitoring the kid by the time they're 25, they're still going to have that risk-averse like mindset because of the way that they were treated until they were 16. POI.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Okay. Secondly, my opponents say that like if parents have their kids have a greater initiative to be good because they know that they're being watched. We tell you that this is a really bad thing because all of the studies that we read that tell you that kids taking risk is necessary for cognitive development. If kids are constantly having to be on quote-unquote good behavior, they're probably not going to do anything risky, which, as my partner tells you, leads to a significant cognitive decline and depression, which are two very, very bad things for a kid. Then on the third point, on education, we tell you that like the education thing is non-unique. Kids can just like look at the wall or something. Like they'll play I Spy. I don't know, man. They can look out the window. On the location thing, my opponents say that there's not a big difference between Life 360 and the child chip. We tell you that looking through a kid's eyes is very different than having their location. Then my opponents say that the child fighting is non-unique. We say that the difference is that when a child and a parent fight, usually they can come to an agreement, right? Like by the time that a child is ready, they will get rid of Life 360. But with the child chip, it's an automatic switch. No matter what issues the child and the parent are having, by the time they turn 16, all of this stuff is going to be off. It's previously set. Which means that like the parent can't adapt to how well the parent and the child are getting along with each other. Instead, they just have to wait until they turn 16 and hope that things are good by then, which is really, really problematic. Then my opponents say that we don't solve for real world violence. We certainly like do solve for real world violence, at least like better than them. This is on the abusive relations thing, because we tell you that like kids will have the foundation to create to like engage in abusive relationships in the future because they don't know how to stand up for themselves because their parent has been standing up for themselves. Like when they see a bad person on the street, their parent is going to be like text them and be like, oh, run away from him. No, thank you. But after they turn 17, they're going to walk up to that bad person, and their parent is going to be like, go away from them, and then they're going to engage with them. Yeah, on the third argument of parental responsibility, this is really big. We tell you that the parent feels completely responsible for all of the child's actions, and because my opponents admit that the parent can't constantly watching the child, it means that the child isn't always in full control, but they feel like they are in full control, which means that if anything bad, if any of the online violence, if any of the kidnapping happens, the parent is going to feel full responsibility for their action because they feel like they could have prevented it, when in reality they still have a job to go to. Okay, so moving on to the parents' argument. You can extend the point that that the parents are going to feel personally responsible. My opponents say that you can't stop a kidnapping. We tell you that a kid texting a parent, or a parent texting a kid to get away from someone or not go in the van or something is probably a lot better than doing nothing. I don't know. What else do you want here?
I don't know. They just have to prove that the chip in the brain is so much better than existing.
Yeah, exactly. The burden of proof for the affirmation is that the chip is significantly better for the kid than existing stuff, and we tell you that it's not, because the child chip is actually worse. But if anything, being able to see through someone's eyes is probably not that much better. I guess you can look at the example that they give, where they're oh, how are you going to stop someone from being sexually assaulted in real time? If you think the answer is no, then it means that they don't solve, because the child chip isn't able to solve these issues. Onto the child argument, we tell you that we are completely winning on the child argument because it is really, really bad for the child. We give you all these studies about how kids are going to have real-world changes in their relationships and how it's going to lead to cognitive decline and depression. Don't let my opponents attempt to outweigh by saying oh, it's going to potentially save them from a kidnapping, when the chances of a kidnapping are very, very little, multiplied by 0.01%. And even if that happens, Life 360 is probably going to solve, and if Life 360 doesn't solve, the chances of the child chip solving is probably still pretty low, because the kidnapper can move around. I don't know. And regardless, we tell you that the cognitive, the 100% probability cognitive impacts on the kid outweigh any high, low probability stuff by my opponents. So I strongly urge a vote for mediation. Thank you.
Okay. My time is now. Or not now. I don't know what I'm saying. You guys can probably pull this on a new sheet or however you want to. It's not going to be anywhere specific, so my time starts now. Judges, let's make this round simple. What our opponents need to do is to prove to you that the key distinctions between the chip and the status quo are going to be so uniquely beneficial that they overwhelm the huge amount of harms that a child will developmentally have if you choose to put this chip in your kid's head. So with that said, let's look at the two distinctions that we have. There's two. The first is that this idea of live blurring of content, based on whatever settings you have. And the second, which is the main one that we should be focusing on, is literally seeing through your kid's eyes and being able to watch what they're seeing at all times. So with that said, we can kind of construct a matrix of pros and cons for this chip. On the pro side, the only thing that still stands here is maybe some marginally small difference in kidnapping. The reason for this is everything else they talk about cyberbullying, about bad content that's being seen on the internet, already has solutions in the status quo. As my partner says, there is very little difference between Life 360 or content monitoring, or as our opponents say, YouTube Kids, versus monitoring this in real time. There's absolutely no difference here, which means the only thing that could possibly be winning on, the only path to the ballot here, is on this kidnapping argument. The reason that con makes no sense is because kidnapping is extremely, extremely, extremely rare. It almost never happens. We tell you that 0.01% of all abduction, or all missing persons reports are actually abductions. They tell you it's rising in the status quo due to cyber things, but there are already solutions in place. The content monitoring that we have in the status quo solves for all these issues, which means there's no reason you should be preferring this chip because it has a lot of negative impacts. So that leads us on to the con side. We tell you there are two main cons, which means you cannot vote for our opponents. The first one is literally zero social development. We tell you these kids will have no opportunity to make friends, form intimate relationships. And the second is no risk taking, because they're always being watched. Their parents can determine risk for them, and parents are risk averse, as we've been saying since the first speech. They're biologically programmed to try to limit the risk for their kid, and this is going to be a superseding force for these kids. So with that said, let's get into a thought experiment. Imagine you are a parent and you are putting this chip in your kid. What are you going to see as the kid's result? First of all, what you're going to see is that this kid is going to have absolutely no friends. There are a few reasons behind this. The first is that, like me personally, I wouldn't want to be friends with someone that has a chip because their parents could always be watching me. Like whatever I say to them is under scrutiny, like a fine-tooth comb. Like if we want to go to a party, I'm being watched. My behavior is being monitored by other people if they have the chip. That means these people are going to become social outcasts. They're going to have no chance for intimate relationships, for social development, for developing skills of self-sufficiency and self-advocacy. This is why we have brought up this UVA warrant from the first speech in this round, where we tell you that kids with overbearing parents have much worse outcomes throughout all aspects of their life. They have worse education, worse chance of being in intimate relationships, because during their childhood they weren't able to develop these skills. And the second point is that your kid is going to have no ability to assess their own risk and be able to take managed risks. The reason this is key is because the chip goes away when you're 16 years old, which means that you're gonna go to a party for the first time, maybe go drink or use drugs for the first time, and this gets completely unmonitored by their parents, and the kid had no chance to develop these skills. Our opponents are gonna come up here in the next speech and say there's gonna be good communication with their kids, but we tell you if a kid is being watched all the time, they're probably gonna be adversarial towards their parents because their parents are destroying their life, making them have no friends. So, we've clearly outlined the pros and cons. They have a very high burden to prove to you that this kidnapping scenario is going to happen, where we've proved to you that development is going to be stunted 100% probability. So that's the highest magnitude impact in today's debate, and I strongly urge an opposition ballot. Thank you.
Okay, quick order, just going down some stuff said in the block before, just independent ballots for side government, and an essential question for the debate round. Is anybody not ready? Okay, my time begins in 3, 2, 1. The biggest question in this debate round that you need to ask yourself before casting your ballot is the need to have a chip better than alternatives that already exist, which is what OP advocates for? We say there are 3 main scenarios in which Life 360 and other existing content filters simply do not solve, where you have to vote Gov in this debate round. First off, Isha gives you abductions. They say this is an incredibly low percentage. However, Isha tells you that it's still a high number, and she also tells you that the world is still dangerous on cyber, and we give you the warrants on cyber. We tell you the 82% increase. So since we are living in a more networked world, we are more likely to experience violence that way, and only the chip solves. Life 360 does not solve for that. The second situation that we tell you vote Gov here is that we say that the child is going to have more discourse, so there's going to be more open communication within a Gov world. Isha tells you, and I tell you from my very first speech, that lots of times when bad things happen to you, you likely don't share it with your parent because you're upset about it, and that leads to built-up trauma, and that means you keep it inside you. However, in a side government world, what it does mean is that you are going to talk about it with your parent, and you are going to have that openness, which allows you to understand your emotions better and live greater. This prevents the mental health impacts that side. This prevents mental health trauma that you might have in the long term. Here you vote Gov on mental health. The third situation in which you vote Gov on this situation, or in this point, is because we think that it makes parents less concerned, a point which side op doesn't interact with at all. We tell you quite simply, parents have reduced anxiety when they know their child's location and can ensure the safety of their child. This simply doesn't happen in an op world. We tell you Life 360 doesn't solve from the first speech for this anxiety, therefore on parent concern you vote Gov. Now, what is another thing that they bring up constantly? We think that this UVA study is a particular area of interest. However, Isha gives a very clean response to this, which is that she says you simply make relationships greater, and we think that later, and we think that it's probably better developmentally if you're focused more on what you are doing and making sure that you're limiting your stress levels. So we think that long term you solve, and you can still make friends in the long term, which is a drop that Isha brings up. So on this impact, we think that you pretty much voted as a wash, because Isha gives a very clear concession. Isha gives a very clear refutation that just doesn't get brought up within the op block. Now, talking a little bit about the sexual assault point, we think that either you vote gov here, or you vote that it's a wash. Why do we think this? If you were able to see through the child's eyes, you're probably more likely to be able to call the police sooner and be able to understand what happened. It promotes open discourse, a point that goes dropped by op. Even if you have Life 360, that doesn't mean you know what's happening to the child, so you can't actually solve it on side op. Then, if you want to vote it as a wash, you simply say the parent knows where the child was, but I don't even think this is comprehensive because you don't know what happened to the child until way later. Therefore, side gov solves because we're able to identify the problem quicker and we're able to solve for it more effectively because we call police faster. Okay, now, what are the 3 independent gov ballots that you vote for over anything else in this debate round, and what is the impact of each of them? First off, we tell you when you look at the mental health aspect, you overwhelmingly vote gov here. They basically give you the only response on this is that kids are going to have more risk-averse mindsets in the long term, and they say this is bad because you can't foster relationships. We actually think that this means that you're going to be, like, as Isha says, a better decision maker, and you're not going to be as hampered with stress, and you're going to understand how to deal with your emotions. But even then, even if you are more inclined to feel stress or feel like you were protected, then just buy that that's probably not that big of an impact, which they don't even give to you. Then, buy on the big drops, the idea that there is a data-driven privacy is completely dropped. Like, the advancement of parent psychology in the long term goes way better, and there's going to be way better parents in the gov world in the long term because they understand how to deal with their child's situations and trauma. Yeah, they drop that they have no reasonable expectation of privacy. Your friends can film you and send it to your parents at any time, but people are still going to be friends, so this whole analysis they give you doesn't stand. Now, the second voting issue here is that we tell you again, uniquely, SQUO does not solve for the problems that we identify. Cross-apply the 3 examples that I give you in my overview as to why that's not the case, but also we tell you content filters can be turned off, therefore this isn't actually a comprehensive solution, and within my first speech I tell you content filters don't solve. The third thing here is that we say that you're going to actually... What?
Existing content filters don't solve.
Yeah, existing content filters don't solve. The third and final ballot that you vote gov on here is the idea of focus in school and the idea of interventions in this situation. Because we tell you from the first speech that your focus in school is going to be greater and you're going to have better social interactions with other people because you are now able to have this in-person setting. Now, at the end of the day, Judge, they don't contextualize the impact of you as to why being more risk-adverse in the long term is that bad. We tell you that that's probably not that bad. You're going to be able to foster relationships in the long term. The harms they give you are only more solved by the child chip because Life 360 and existing content filters simply don't solve. Thank you, and please vote gov.
Good job, guys.
Good round.
Stick around.
Do you want us to sit in here, kick us out?
I don't care.
Okay.
We can go outside.
Yeah, we can go.
Thank you guys so much, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Neg, who's first again?
Logan Ramadan.